Hello and welcome to Possibility to Profit. I'm Blaine Bartlett and I'm going to be your host over the course of the next 5 days. We're going to be spending about an hour and a half today and over the course of the next 4 days looking at how you move possibility to profit. And I'm very excited about this because there's a couple of things going on here. First of all, the notion of profit. Obviously, you can look at it in the context of money, but that's going to be the smallest part of what we're going to be looking at here. Profit, very simply, if I ask the question, what is profit, and just kind of play with that notion a little bit, what is profit? Well, profit is what's left over after I've invested a certain amount. And it's that surfeit, it's that surplus, it's what's left over. Now, that's obviously true in the context of money. Businesses are always doing things that are designed to enhance their profitability. So there's investments. Successful businesses don't spend resources. Successful businesses invest resources. Spending gets you nothing in return. Investing, that's what we're looking at. So part of the question that I'd like you to explore over the course of this next 5 days together is the distinction between where you spend your time and where you invest your time. Where you spend resources, where you invest resources, and what are the resources that you are either spending or investing. The more you can begin investing, the greater the likelihood you're going to be creating more and more profit for yourself. I can spend time doing this. Well, okay, that's a different move than I can invest time doing this. Investment, embedded in that word is the assumption that there will be a return on that investment. And it doesn't have to be monetary. What's the return that I can increase? And it's going to be a function of actually how I approach investing to make that happen. So as we start looking at the course of these next couple of days here, I want to give you just a little bit of a roadmap about what you can look forward to here. So we've got 5 days together. Today, what we're going to be looking at is the notion that everything is consciousness. And I mean that very literally. I'm going to approach consciousness as the first cause of everything and anything. Day 2, tomorrow, we're going to be looking at what I'm calling the gravity of how. Gravity, the seriousness of how. And people get very serious about how do I do this? Well, part of what we're going to look at tomorrow is letting go of that death grip that we have on how, because how can ultimately become a prison that can be detrimental to what it is that we'd like to have happen in our lives. Third day, we're going to be looking at a metaphor that I developed that we call, basically called the bow wake. And essentially, it's a way of looking at how you position yourself, your presence in your life. What is the consequence of how you are showing up in producing the kinds of profits that you would like to see in your life, whether they're monetary or whether they're relational, or whether they're in health and well-being, whatever it might be. Your bow wake will make a big difference in this. Day 4, we're going to be looking at the nature of commitment. And in my experience, over 40 years of working with individuals and businesses, is that most people don't understand what commitment actually is, if they're going to be able to leverage it effectively. You never want to be committed to something. You never want to be committed to something. And there's a very specific reason that we're going to explore on day 4 about why that is so. And then on day 5, we're going to be looking at what I believe to be actually the single most important key to sustainable success. And it is hugely important when we start looking at how this actually works in life. So today, this is what we're going to be looking at. Everything is consciousness. You're going to learn why noticing what you notice can make or break you. And it literally begins to be that simple. Most people have not a clue what they're noticing, where their attention is going, what it is that they're actually paying attention to. And I'm going to just kind of throw a little idea out here. And not that it's true, but I think that it's worth uncovering a couple of things here for those of you that are in a business, because the purpose of business, and this is a change in thinking, the purpose of business isn't to make a profit. The purpose of business is to uplift and improve the quality of all life on this planet. And if I'm coming from that position, that the purpose of my business is to uplift and improve the quality of all life on the planet, if I'm doing that well, I'm going to be connected in ways that are profound. And one of the things that I'm going to be connected to is profitability. Because if people feel good about themselves when they're in the presence of my service or quality, if they feel uplifted, if they feel improved, I will never not have customers. So one of the very first things that I want you to notice is how you think about your business. What do you think the purpose of your business is? Yes, you're in business to deliver a product or a service. But if you start to think about it in a bigger sense, in a different way, things other than what we would typically pay attention to start to appear as possibilities that can enhance the profitability of what you're doing. The purpose of your relationship is to uplift and improve the quality of all that are consumed and touched by your relationship. Uplift and improve the quality. Now, all of this starts to kind of make sense when you start thinking about how you actually think about things. And I want to share with you a idea. It's not actually an idea. It's more, what's the word I'd use? It's actually a poem that I came across years ago. And I use this poem in just about all of the work that I do with clients. And it's, I think, a fascinating exposure to a different idea, a different way of thinking about what actually is going on in life. And it's titled Noticing, and it's by an individual by the name of R.D. Lang. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. Now I want to just stop right there for just a moment. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. What are the roadblocks? What are the things? What are the bars on the prison that I don't even know that are there? Because as long as I'm not noticing what's containing me, it's impossible for me to see beyond that. And we've all heard about, you got to think outside of the box, get out of the box. Most people don't have a clue about what the box is. The range of what we think and do is limited. What we actually behave, how we behave, what we have in our lives is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's little that we can do to change. And this is the invitation, is to open yourself up to exploring different possibilities. And this is kind of going back to becoming a beginner, the mind of a beginner. Because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's little we can do to change. This is where curiosity starts to come into play. This is where you start opening up cupboard doors and going, I wonder what's in there. Those sorts of, and failing to notice, there's little that we can do to change because we didn't notice what was impeding us. Until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. And like I said, this is from R.D. Lang. The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's little that we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds. We can't change anything. We can't actually increase profitability in our lives in the broadest sense of that word until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and our deeds. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about that and just kind of make it practical. I like to fish. I love to fish, as a matter of fact. And I've been fishing since I was probably 6 years old, 5 years old, when my dad took me out to a little creek and we had some crankbait and I caught my first little fish. I got hooked, no pun intended, but I did. I got hooked. And I've been fishing ever since. About 25, 30 years ago, I started fly fishing. Actually, about 40 years ago, I started fly fishing, quite frankly, and I got pretty good at it. I was tying my own flies. I got to know some folks that were really good at doing this. They taught me a lot of things. I've managed to fish a lot of different streams, a lot of different water. But for the last 12, 15 years, about the last 12 years actually, I hadn't been doing much fly fishing. I've been doing some ocean fishing. My son is a sports fishing captain up in Alaska, so I'd go up and we'd fish for salmon and halibut and some bottom fish up there with him. But I wasn't doing any fly fishing to speak of. And I'd gotten out of practice with it, but I still had the passion for it. I still love to do it. And so about 3 years ago, I was invited on a fly fishing trip in Montana with a group of friends that I've known for a long time. And we ended up going to Yellowstone and fishing the Yellowstone River. And this is where this noticing starts to come into play. Because on this river, and it's gorgeous, Yellowstone National Park, this Yellowstone River is just spectacular. And it's world renowned for its trout. A friend of mine and myself, we had a guide with us. And the guide, if you understand fly fishing, this is one of the things that I was really enamored with about fly fishing, is that it is not just throwing something into the water and hoping to pick up a fish. When you're fly fishing, if you're really getting good at it, and if you're really intent with it, you're starting to pay attention to the water. You're starting to look at just kind of where fish will be holding, where they're likely to be most of the time. You start paying attention to what's in the water in terms of insects, what's hatching, what's emerging, those sorts of things that the trout might be eating, that the fish might be paying attention to themselves. And so to the best of your ability, and this is where you start to tie flies that mimic in some way, shape, or form that natural hatch, that natural emergence that's coming out in the insect world that is the mainstay of the trout's diet. And I loved that complexity. I loved the sophistication, and more than anything else, I loved the fact that I was able to make a distinction between fishing and catching. Fishing for me is almost a meditative process, and the profit that comes out of fishing is the actual catching of the fish. In order to maximize the profit, I needed to be able to understand how the fish were actually being in their world, because that was a world that I was entering. And paying attention to it from that perspective made all the difference in the world for me. And so going back to this stream that we were fishing, this friend of mine, you don't see him in this picture, but we were standing no more than about 20 feet apart from each other, maybe 30 feet apart from each other, casting into the same water, casting into the same spots in the water. And we had the same flies on. The guide had organized, he knew the water really well, so he'd organized that we had what we were supposed to have in terms of the flies. So he'd cast, and his fly would drift over this spot on the water. I'd cast, my fly would drift over basically the same spot on the water. But something very interesting started to happen. Even though we were casting into the same river, and we were casting into the same spot, and we were both, really, I've been doing this a long time, so I can actually cast a fly very well. My presentation, his presentation, both of our presentations, there was nothing to change there. So mechanically, we were doing everything the same way. He started pulling fish out. Once, that's kind of good. Good for you. Twice. Okay, what's going on here? 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. He starts pulling fish out, and I'm not getting anything. And I'm going over the same body of water, using the same fly setup, passing over the same spot that he's pulling fish out of. And I started to get a little frustrated. Here's one of the things that, one of the fish that he was actually pulling out. Now, these are big fish, they're gorgeous fish, they're beautiful fish, and we're fishing catch and release. So, this is protected water, so everything is going back in. But I was very intrigued. Why was he getting these fish and I wasn't? What wasn't I noticing? And that's really where I started getting intrigued. I would feel a tug on the line and I would dismiss it as just the current pulling. And he would feel a tug on his line, but he had enough discernment. He was noticing things a little bit differently than what I was noticing. And as a consequence, what he was thinking and doing was different than what I was thinking and doing. My thinking and doing was limited by what I wasn't noticing. His was informed by what he was noticing. He was pulling more fish out. As a matter of fact, I didn't catch a fish that day. And he ended up pulling 5 fish out of that same area of water. So the idea of noticing becomes very important when we start paying attention to how life actually conspires to provide profit for us, I guess is what you'd have to say. Notice what you're noticing, because energy will follow attention. And because energy follows attention, results will follow the flow of energy. Where are you putting your energy? And it's an investment. Notice what you're noticing. What are you investing in? Are you investing in discovering more? Are you investing in doing exactly what you've always been doing because it's the only thing that you know how to do? Two differences. And one of them is going to pay dividends, one of them isn't. So what you can begin doing is noticing how this works. And it's a function of awareness. And this is something that I think is useful when you start looking at this. And I want to just pull this up here so that you've got a better sense of how I'm going to be talking about this. I'm going to pull this one down, noticing what you're noticing, and we'll bring a different slide up here. Levels of awareness. Life happens. As a matter of fact, I'm going to just go ahead and enlarge this so that you can see it much more clearly, and I'll move myself out of the picture here. Life is happening. And as life happens, there's a couple of different ways that I can actually think about life happening to me, or by me, or through me, or as me. If one of the people, and this is the vast majority of people on the planet, by the way, people think that life is happening to them. I'm just here and life happens. At worst, this positions you to be a victim. I don't have agency. I'm buffeted by what goes on around me. Life is happening to me. And if I'm lucky, I get to make some different choices here that, can get me out of being a victim, but that's where I start acting more responsible. Well, that happened, what can I do about it? Life still happened to me, and the consciousness is one of life is happening to me. I'm still feeling as if I'm at effect of life's vicissitudes. That's just kind of, it's out of my control. When I start moving up the levels of awareness cycle here, just so to speak, and it's metaphorically up, I start thinking from the perspective of, and this is mindset. My mindset is, life is happening by me, and this is a natural progression from, the state of moving from victim to responsible. When I start moving into responsible, I start thinking a little bit differently, and I start thinking that I'm actually, got some control. I've got some things that I can do here. And this can feel particularly useful, and it can be particularly useful in terms of how I position myself in life. But what's interesting about this, if I get stuck here, and this is where you'll see a lot of people get very upset a lot. Anger is the consequence of feeling out of control. It's feeling as if I can't control what's going on with me. Life is still happening, and I'm trying to control it. The opposite of that, it's not the opposite so much, but it's a migration up, is into the domain of surrender. And this doesn't mean I'm giving up. I'm not giving up. I'm just acknowledging that life is what it is. This is what it is. I'm not going to try and control it. It is what it is. That moves me out of the domain of reactivity and into the domains, these top two levels, of responsiveness. Being responsive as opposed to reactive. And if I'm looking to move possibility into profitability, I want to be in the position of being responsive, not reactive. When I start believing that life is happening through me, consciousness moves to, through, and through me, I start questioning, how is that happening? What do I need to be paying attention to? And this is where noticing starts to come into play. How is life moving through me? How is it moving through me? What's it compelling? What's it moving? What's it pointing me towards? Those sorts of things. Now, that questioning still involves some sense of separation, but it invites me to begin to appreciate life as something that I am definitely a part of. There's a co-creation. How is life using me to produce the results that I'm having in this world? This is where manifestation starts to begin to be a very interesting concept. And as I move from this notion of life is happening through me, and I start appreciating that I am co-creating, I start actually seeing myself as not separate from life. That the results I'm producing are actually something that is a part of me. Life is happening through me and as me. And I start disappearing this notion of separation, and I start looking for how I am coordinating all aspects of my life with other aspects that are out there with with me. So what's the dance? It's not a dance of separation, it's a dance of unity. I'm co-creating, and this is where I came up with my definition of leadership, which is the activity of co-creating coordinated movement. This is how we actually define leadership. It's the activity of co-creating coordinated movement. And when you're looking at this, in that context, this is one of the things that you pay particular attention to. So I'm going to invite us to take a look at another idea here. And this is how in a business world we actually see ourselves coming into a position where something else occurs. And that something else is very simply the ways that these levels of awareness play out. Moving possibility into reality. And I want you to check in with yourself as I talk about this, because I think it's going to be interesting to see how you actually can position this in your own mind. Every one of us have heard about vision. What's your vision for your future? What's your vision for yourself? What's your vision for your relationship? What's your vision for your business? And that's predicated on a very simple question here. Why is this important to me? And in the answer to that question, why is this important to me, I start seeing the ways that why gets answered. Why is this important? It would look like this if this was answered. That vision question becomes the pragmatic expression of my why. Why is this important? Well, it's because this is the difference that it gets to make. Then we start looking at what's the best way to go about doing that, and that literally is the what. Excuse me. The what, every vision, there's multiple pathways to any vision in life. There's multiple ways that I can get from point A to point B. How do I do that? That's the tactical side. The question, though, is before that, what path is the best? And then once I've defined the path that I think is going to be most tenable, I start looking at the executables. What are the tactics? What needs to be put in place? And this is where we start putting in goals. Goals are designed to make the vision a reality. Now, where this gets to be interesting is that this is almost exclusively where most people pay attention. 80% of most people's energy is organized around these three areas: vision, strategy, tactics. Why, what, how. 80% is focused there, but it is only literally 5% of what actually gets produced. Now I'm going to unbundle that notion here in just a minute. Below this is where awareness begins to come into play, is mindset. And mindset here has to do with what's the parameters, what's the beliefs, what's in place here that informs the why, what, and how, the vision, the strategy, and the tactics. Typically, those are going to be developed out of an existing mindset. And this is, if I'm not paying attention, if I'm not noticing what I'm noticing, if I'm not noticing what's in place around my mindset, I'm going to continue to select vision, strategy, tactical dynamics that are similar to what I've done over and over and over and over again. And people, I mean, some of the simplest ways to explain this are people that go on to diets. Rather than exploring the mindset that's in play, what we end up doing is we say, well, okay, I've got this diet, here's, I'm going to do Jenny Craig, and here's the tactics. And it works for a period of time until it doesn't, and then we're right back to it again. But we use the same vision, strategy, tactic, structure without examining the mindset that went into informing that structure. Now, mindset gets reified, mindset gets set in place very strongly for most people real early on in life. And unless it's examined, it becomes almost a concrete block sitting on top of consciousness, sitting on top of this thing. And these two areas, mindset and consciousness, is where I really want to pay attention. Aliveness and consciousness are correlated. Aliveness has to do with being able to access that spirit, the joie de vivre, if you will, that can give, what's the word I'd use here? That can make passion something that is tangibly real, that's fun. Aliveness and passion can actually kind of get correlated here. What am I passionate about? What am I most alive about? Do I have a sparkle in my eye? Do I have a twinkle in my eye? Do I have a bounce in my step? People that have that are tapping into the spirit that informs what it is that they're trying to do, what it is that they're wanting to have happen. And this is where co-creation and coordinated movement comes into play. When that aliveness is there, when consciousness has an opportunity, when spirit has an opportunity to actually give voice to something, you now have the possibility of moving it to reality. So this idea of this 5%, I want to come back to this because it's an important piece to understand. And working with mindset is not something that's easy to do because it is so reified and it is so invisible for most people that it's almost, trying to do it by yourself is really difficult. So I want to just kind of illustrate a couple of things here, and I'm going to pull this up full screen so that you can see this, and I'm going to disappear myself once again. Five 5% of our behavior is consciously regulated. And by consciously regulated, that's what I'm talking about in that 5% on the previous slide. The strategy, the vision, and the tactics. These are things that we consciously think about. And in that thinking, we organize our behavior. And it's 5%. Underneath that 5% are our habits and the routines that we engage in. And these are the stuff that are out of mind. Habitual, they're automatic. You woke up this morning, you got out of bed on the same side of the bed that you always get out of. You got into the bathroom and you brushed your teeth with the same hand using the same motions that you did the morning before or the night before. And you just kind of fill in the blanks. You got your favorite coffee cup or teacup, whatever it is, that you get every morning. You went to work following the same route that you follow every morning. All of these things become habituated. And more than that, the ways that we interact with other people, the ways that we interact with ideas, the ways that we interact with new ideas, the ways we interact with change, all of these things are typically unconscious and habitual. And even though we say, yes, that's a good idea, there's something that holds us back, something that pulls us back, that we aren't able to get beyond. We'll try for a short period of time, and that's that 5%. This is where effort comes in, willpower comes in the dieting standpoint, but we get snapped back. It's a function of our mindset. And that mindset is unbelievably powerful. So where did it come from? Because this is what limits us, being able to move possibility into profit. Where are we investing our energy? And for most people, that investment is in an unconsciously recognized place. We invest over and over and over to reinforce something that is already existing that doesn't serve us well. So I'm going to, big shout out to my very dear friend, Bob Proctor. Bob and I have known each other for a long time. He was first exposed to what he calls the stick man, probably about 45, 50 years ago. He's been in this business longer than I have. But he shares this with his audiences all the time. This is foundational to his teaching. It's also foundational to my teaching. This is a map of the mind, because most people don't know what the mind looks like, and they don't know how it works. And this is where mindset is actually developed, and this is actually how mindset actually causes results in life. So just taking this little stick person that Bob has gratefully allowed sharing for me here. So what you've got are three different components to this. One is the conscious mind. This is our thinking mind. It's our rational mind. It's the one that most of us, when we're paying attention, this is what we're paying attention to, the thoughts that are in our mind. And then there's the subconscious mind. And it's subconscious because it's out of awareness. It's out of awareness. This is where our habituated behaviors lie. This is where our prejudices and biases, this is where our belief systems, all of this stuff lies out of sight, out of mind. We're not noticing it, and because we don't notice it, it's impossible for us to change until we start noticing what we're not noticing. This third part is our body. And the body is what we use to leverage what our mind is doing. Okay, it's the mechanism by which we produce results. So we have different physical faculties that allow us to actually navigate this physical reality that we live in. We can see, we can hear, we can smell, we can taste, we can touch. And these are input faculties. This is what we use to bring information into our mind so that we can assign meaning to it. And off of that meaning, we can then develop behaviors that hopefully will produce the results that we say that we want. Now, let's look at how mindset gets developed. And we're going to have to go back in time here, shortly after birth. And actually, some people say prenatally, before you actually come out into the world, you're actually hearing things. You're actually feeling things. So these faculties are already coming into play. And all of this information starts to get dumped into the subconscious mind. Now, what's important about this is to recognize that the subconscious mind is non-discriminating. It accepts anything and everything that is dumped into it. It doesn't say yes or no. It doesn't say good or bad. It doesn't say right or wrong. It just says, oh, okay. It comes in, it comes in, it comes in, it comes in, it comes in. And the mind is a pattern recognition mechanism. It looks for patterns. This is one of the ways that we actually organize our lives, with all of the sensory data that we have coming in. We start organizing it based on similarities and patterns. And so as this information starts to come in, we go, oh, I've seen that before. And so it gets lined up, and you've got circuitry that starts to build in your brain, literally neuron circuits that begin to move themselves into position. And this is where habituated thinking starts to come into play. This is where emotions start to come into play. How I think about something determines how I feel about it. How I feel about it ultimately drives my behavior. So all of this material is coming into our mind, and until about the age of 3 or 4, we aren't discriminating at all. I mean, it's just coming in. Our world and us are the same for all intents and purposes. And at about the age of 3, 4 sometimes, you'll start to hear little kids go, no. No, I don't want to. They start discriminating. And this is the development, the beginning of the development of the conscious mind. And this is where they begin to know differences between right and wrong. They start to go, well, mom said or dad said, don't do that. It doesn't automatically go into their mind as something that they can do. They now stop and pause and reflect. And instead of just being, a sponge, they're now having some way of selecting what actually gets dropped in. So this is a very brief summary of how the subconscious mind gets populated and the belief systems that are put in place. Now, there's some studies that indicate by the time an individual is around 16, 18 years of age, 80% of their behaviors are hardwired. 80, sometimes even close to 90%, and ultimately we get up to the point where it's 95% of our behaviors, our thinking, our belief systems, our mindset is hardwired in the subconscious mind. It's hardwired because it doesn't get examined. It doesn't get to see the light of day, literally. So when we look at this, and this is where you start producing results, you have this collection of ideas in your subconscious mind. All of this stuff that has been formulating and finding ways to match, and all of a sudden, going, this and this are the same, it must mean this, so you've got meaning generation going on. All of these things, and behaviors predicated on meaning. If this means it's dangerous, I'll move away from it. If this means attraction, I'll move closer to it. Meaning and behavior are very strongly correlated. The ideas in your subconscious mind begin to formulate an identity. This is who I am, this is who I'm not. So you end up formulating a story about who you are and where you belong in the world, what you can and you can't do, what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. It's manufactured, but it's a story, but it's also a powerful story. It's so powerful, in fact, that it produces consistently actions in your life that generate the results that you have in your life. Now, this is the simple cycle. If you're not getting the results, if you're not getting the kind of profit that you want in your life, and again, in the broadest sense of that word, you need to be able to examine the story that's driving this, the mindset that's driving this. This top portion, the conscious mind, is only 5%. You tell yourself, I'd like to do this differently, I'd like to do that differently, but the story drives 95% of everything that goes on. The conscious mind is, however, the entrance to the subconscious. And how you go about working with that conscious mind to begin to alter the subconscious is where the work gets done. And this is where you start moving possibility into profit. With these different faculties, just kind of look at this and see how this works. We'll just take our sight, what we notice. I say what I'd like to have is $1 million. I look at my checkbook, my current results, and does not have anywhere close to $1 million in it. So what I say I'd like to have is $1 million in my checking account. I look at my checking account, and what I see is a current result that says, not anywhere close. Those current results get impressed on my conscious mind, and my conscious mind is filled with an image of present results. And there's this dichotomy, this push-pull, this conflict. I want to have that, but my focus, where's my attention? Energy will follow attention. My conscious mind is filled with an image of the present results, and that reinforces what's already in the subconscious. The subconscious mind accepts the image of present results and goes, yeah, of course. Yeah, this is just what that's just what is. And that begins to produce actions, not surprisingly, that generate similar results. It's a loop. And what's going on here is I don't do the heavy lifting to make a difference in the subconscious. I leave just that thought alone by itself without reinforcing it, without having a way to structure a shift in the subconscious. And that's where we get ourselves into trouble. And if you want to move possibility into profit, you need to be able to work at the level of the subconscious, the mindset that is informing everything that goes on in your behavior. How people think manifests the results that they have in their life. How we think manifests the results that we have in our lives. And that's where we want to pay attention. We want to be able to say, this needs to shift. In some way, shape, or form, what I want to be able to do is change my thinking in a tangible way, in a reinforced way, that allows for a shift to occur in the subconscious so that different results end up becoming produced. That's what I'm looking to have happen. So when we're looking at this, what we want to be able to do is understand just kind of how we think. And one way that you can look at this is how people think results are manifested. And most people think that results are manifested in time. And there's a past, there's a future, and there's this timeline that gets created in our minds. How people think results are manifested. Past, future, now exists on this timeline, and it is continuously moving from one direction to the other. And I get myself confused here with my hands. Okay? So it's moving down the timeline. And we've got this goal that we'd like to have, a desired result out here. I want more profit. I want whatever profit looks like, better relationship, better success in business, better health and well-being, better, whatever it might be. That's the profit, that is a consequence of the investment. Investment in changing the mindset will always produce a profit, but it is an investment. You need to stick with it. You're not day trading here. Okay? Now, this is how most people on this planet think. And the way that this works is, I'm standing here now and I set a goal for myself, but I look in the past and I go, how did I get here? How did I get here? Well, I look to the past and I go, well, that's how I got here. There's a cause that produced an effect, the cause that produced an effect, a cause that produced an effect, and that, that's cumulative effects ended up with me standing here right now saying, here's the result that I have in my life. I say, here's where I'd like to go. Over here. I want to go in that direction and I want to get a new result. I want to have $1 million in my checking account. So I assume that it requires time in order to do that. I need to put in the time. And this is where, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, we get stuck. We get stuck on what's the first step? What's the how? And this is not a way to work. This does not work well. It doesn't work well for a whole lot of reasons that we're going to explore tomorrow. But specifically, it doesn't work well because you're literally held captive by time. And I mean that very specifically. Physical time emerges because we think of ourselves as separate from everything else. We're separate from our goal. Remember, our goal on that timeline was out there in the future. It was out there. We were back here. We think of ourselves as separate. And time and space do come into play here. Time is a consequence of the imagined space between body A and body B. How much time will it take me to get there? I'm going to invite you to think a little bit differently here. I'm going to invite you to think about time in a completely different fashion. What I'd like you to be able to do, and what I'd like you to entertain, is that time actually could be different. As a matter of fact, Albert Einstein said that time is a stubbornly persistent illusion. And he meant that very literally. Time is a very persistently stubborn illusion. When we start thinking of time, here's a way that you can begin to think about this. Think about time in the context of frequency. Think about life more specifically in the context of frequencies. And this is where consciousness starts to come into play here. Everything exists as a frequency. Everything vibrates. The chair that you're seated in right now is vibrating. You can't notice that it's vibrating, but it is vibrating at the molecular level, at the quantum level, at the atomic level. It's vibrating. And again, Einstein said that matter is simply vibration slowed down to the point where we can perceive it. That's all that matter is. It's a frequency. And anything that exists in a certain frequency phase, you will be able to experience. So let's just take time as an example here to kind of illustrate this. We've got our past, we've got our future, and we've got now. And now exists in a certain frequency. And when I mean that, I mean now exists in all of its attributes and everything that's associated with it at a certain frequency level, and we will see manifestation of that in our current reality. We'll see it in our bank account, we'll see it in our car, we'll see it in the house, we'll see it in the kind of relationships that we have. That now exists at a frequency state, and it's a function of our mindset. It's a function of what we have, our mindset vibrates at a very specific level. And we are like a radio transmitter. We're tuned in to a frequency that is determined by our mindset. And that's, this is where consciousness starts to actually pay a dividend when you start paying attention to it. You want to notice what you're noticing. Now, I'm going to invite you to just play with this for a moment here. It's a thought experiment. But just imagine that time doesn't exist in the traditional sense. That there is no past, there is no future, there is just now. And everything that has ever existed, everything that will ever exist, exists in the now. The only distinction that you need to be aware of is that you don't notice it because you're not vibrating at that frequency. You're not resonating at that frequency. Everything that is in your experience is a consequence of the resonance that you have with now. So when you set your objective out here, they say, okay, I'd like to have that $1 million. It's out there in the future. I want more profit, which would be a better relationship, that ideal weight, my six-pack abs, whatever it could be. Rather than seeing it out there somewhere distant from you, you start imagining that future as if it were just simply a frequency. It's already here, I just haven't arrived yet. I'm going to say that again. It's already here, I just haven't arrived yet. So when I arrive at that frequency, I'll look around and I will notice that that future is now. It was always here. I just wasn't at that frequency. Now, what's interesting about this from a concept perspective is it doesn't require linear thinking. It doesn't require a linear cause-effect. What it requires is a shift in mindset. What it requires is a shift in consciousness. And it's that shift in consciousness that we want to pay particular attention to. Energy follows attention. And profitability will follow where your energy is directed. You increase your attention on a specific frequency by how you think, by how you feel, by how you talk, by how you behave, all of these things. You start doing this and you start changing that vibrational frequency. It's an emotion that comes into play. That's what you're looking to create, is that experience of frequency shift. It's an investment. You need to invest the energy. You need to invest the attention required to make that shift. That's what we're looking at with this. And this is something that most people don't really grasp. This is something that when you really begin to pay attention to it, you start to appreciate how it works. And this is what leaders, highly effective leaders, do. Highly effective leaders are the people in life that have the ability, literally the ability, to make possibility visible. They make possibility visible, not just as a picture on the wall. They make possibility visible as a living consequence. They feel it, they breathe it. Steve Jobs was famous for a whole lot of things, but one of the things that was attributed to him was something that was called the reality distortion field. And when people were in his presence, he would be talking about what he was up to, an idea that he had, in such a way that you walked away actually feeling as if it were real. And people would shake their head and go, whoa, what happened? Because when they began the conversation with him, they thought he was crazy. This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. This will never happen. They walked away going, I can't believe we haven't got this already. That reality distortion field, it's a frequency, it's a phase shift, it's a disruption of existing now. And as a leader, you think it, you breathe it, you talk it, you smell it, you taste it, you insist that people around you do the same things. How do you do that? Well, that's one of the ways that you do that. Specifically, we're going to look at some of that tomorrow when we look at the gravity of how. And that moves us into this area where it's not just the leader making the visibility, things visible. There's execution that's required. You actually need to make some things happen. And I'm going to use the word manager here in a generalized way, just to make the distinction between leader and manager. Leaders are focused on possibility. They're focused on co-creating coordinated movement. The nature of that co-created coordinated movement is where managers, quote unquote, come into play. These are it's the activity of making the possibility probable. So you're starting to put metrics in place. You're starting to put parameters around things. You start identifying tactical things that you can do from an execution standpoint to make that possibility now, to make it now. And taken together, both will turn possibility into a profitable reality. You need both. Absolutely. You need both of these in order to make that happen. So what we're looking at is how you go about making possibility more profitable. And it's a function of investment. Make no mistake about it. It is a function of investment. And when you're looking at investment, what are you investing in? You're investing in yourself. You're investing in an exploration of your mindset. And going back to the poem, until you notice it, you can't change it. And it's a failure to notice that you're not noticing that will keep you stuck. When we're looking at work here, I'm going to be providing, as part of your participation in the program, some different resource materials. And one of the materials that I want to provide is a very simple reading. And you're going to get this as a PDF. It's going to be, you're going to get an email at the conclusion of this program today that will point you towards both the replay of today, but also towards, oops, go back in time here, towards, okay, there we go, I'll get the right screen up here. A reading that I'd like to invite you to take some time with. It's out of this small little book called The Power of Awareness by Neville Goddard. I've been reading this book for years. It's marked up, it's dog-tailed, it's all kinds of stuff here. And he's talking about consciousness in this particular reading. It's a very short reading. And the reason I want you to pay some attention to it is it gives you some formal way of understanding what I'm talking about. But I want to just highlight a couple of passages here. It's only by a change of consciousness, by actually changing your concept of yourself, that you can build more stately mansions. And he talks about that in manifestations of higher and higher concepts. By manifesting is meant experiencing the results of these concepts in your world. So turning possibility into profit is what we're looking at here. And this is where consciousness comes into play. Max Planck was acknowledged as the father of quantum physics. At one point in time, said that it seems like we can get behind everything. We can get behind everything. We can get behind an atom, and we find that there's something else. There's a nucleus to this atom. We can get, there's electrons, there's protons, and you can get behind everything. But there's a point where you can't get behind something, and that's something he called consciousness. We can get behind everything, but we can't get behind. There's nothing behind consciousness. Consciousness seems to be the first cause of everything. Consciousness seems to be the first cause of everything. And Neville Goddard goes on to say here that consciousness is the one and only reality. It is the first and only cause substance of the phenomena of life. Nothing has existence for man, colloquially man or woman, save through the consciousness he or she has of it. Save for the consciousness that he or she has of it. Your mind is always arranged in the image of all that you believe and consent to as being true. Now think about that. Your mind is always arranged in the image of all that you believe and consent to be true. And this goes back to your subconscious mind. It's organized in a very specific way. Noticing how it's organized makes a big difference. And if you want different results, you have to change that subconscious mindset that allows for it to be in alignment with that new result that you'd like to produce. The basic nature of the primal cause is consciousness. Therefore, the ultimate substance of all things is consciousness. You'll get a copy of this reading, and I'd like you to just kind of play with it, think about it, how you can work with it, what it might imply for how you go about your life and go about doing what you're doing. And we'll explore that in a little bit more detail when we start working with day 2, which is the gravity of how. Now, from this point forward, I want to just kind of give you a little bit of a heads up about what we're doing next year. I'm going to be stepping aside here for just a moment, and I've got a very good friend of mine, Dolan White, who is going to be interviewing a client of mine, Joseph Strausinger, and Joseph is the CEO and co-founder of JD Properties back in New York. Joseph was one of the first members of my leadership mindset group, and Dolan actually worked with me in the setup and development of that mastermind, the leadership mastermind. And what Dolan is going to be doing is asking Joseph some questions here about, and this goes directly towards mindset. The mastermind program is a 52-week, it's a year-long program, meets once a week, and there's a very specific structure to it that I'll talk about on the last day of our webinar. But I want you to just hear from somebody that's actually been part of this program so that you've got an idea of some of the things that go into actually shifting mindset and what are some of the consequences of shifting the mindset. And when we come back, I'm going to take a couple of questions that I've got queued up here, and then we will move into kind of a closing, and I'll set up the next day. So I'm going to fade myself out of here, and in my fading out, I am going to bring in Dolan and Joseph.
So thank you, Blaine. I appreciate you passing the ball over to me. So today I'm blessed. I get a chance to sit here and chat with Joseph Strausinger. Joseph's a great man. And Joseph, thank you for taking time just to spend a few minutes with me today.
You're so welcome. I'm happy to be here. Excited to help out and move this group forward. And I think I'm just so grateful for Blaine for over the past year, the course I've been through with him. So happy to.
Awesome. So tell me, so just for the sake of everybody that's not met you, tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So Joseph Strausinger. I'm the CEO and co-founder of JD Prosperities. We're an individual business consulting firm. Been in business for about 3 years now. But my background, it goes pretty deep. It's in finance. I started very young in the business, 1996. I got started at probably one of the most notorious brokerage firms in history, called Stratton Oakmont. There was a movie about it, Wolf of Wall Street. That's how pretty much people know that firm. Started very young, answered an ad in the paper, was asked to, show some of my sales skills. And before I knew it, I was, calling people on the phone, talking about the markets and are you in the markets? Are you buying stocks? And would produce those leads for another broker. He told me to get my Series 7 and I looked in and saw everybody doing very well. And that's what I did. I went on, passed my Series 7, became a broker very early on in my career, learned a lot of what to do as far as sales and what not to do from the investment standpoint with the public. From there, got very wise. Was fortunate enough to have some great clients in my life. As a matter of fact, some of them were trustee of banks, and they set me in the right direction to wind up landing at American Express. And I spent a 19-year career at American Express as an independent financial advisor. Later on, got my business financial advisor designation, and then started feeling like there was more. There's more to be done. I always received advice from inside the business, never stepped outside of the box, if you will, and sought other counsel or other coaches or other mentors in my life. And I was at this turning point where I wanted to do more. So I opened a consulting business, decided to get some mentors and coaches, was introduced to a gentleman by the name of David Meltzer, worked with him for about 13 months. He happens to be co-author of Compassionate Capitalism with Blaine. Yeah. And that's what led me here today. I've went through the course over the past year with Blaine, and it's just so wonderful for me, and also the others surrounding me and the businesses that I'm involved with. It's helping every day progress forward. So happy to be here.
That's amazing. That's an interesting career. That's such an amazing path. I love that path. So when you were as participating in the program, there are things that attract us into participating. So then just Sure. What was it that attracted you? I mean, what was it that you found interesting and that you were looking for?
one, first and foremost, the credibility that Blaine has throughout the leadership development world speaks volumes. And I already had known of Blaine through David Meltzer. So, it was pretty much an easy transition when I picked up that he was going to do something with a mastermind. Myself, I've always been a person to go out there, network, go to events, things, but never really joined a mastermind that would last an extended period of time. We would have consistency in the program. And actually, Blaine developed a book to go along with it. So for me, it was something that just really attracted me to every week to be, going through different topics and different courses and relating it to, not only the now, but history. Right. And some, touching on some great things that occurred. And, really, that's what attracted me. I mean, I, was there I went into it thinking that, I haven't done a mastermind. I'm going to give it my all. Of course, things come up. There were some times I missed it, but I will tell you one thing, the consistency that came from Blaine and his team, that was just amazing. And those are some things I try to implement in my life, right? That I'm learning now. So.
That's interesting. It's funny you mentioned it because that's one of the things I was curious about is, to your point, when you go through a mastermind, there's a lot of things that occur, and it's can be a lot of information. Just, is there anything that kind of leaps to your mind that came out of the mastermind that you either apply in your life or, use in your business, or kind of lessons that you came away with?
So many things. And I think the biggest thing is that going out there and be able to co-create, being able to be open up to other possibilities and not, relying just on myself, work with others, and ask for help, right? Very important. And the way Blaine put it together, and yes, it's a lot of information, right? Even though it's over 52 weeks, it is a lot of information. But having that and having those tools now, you have a book. You have, I've taken notes. I have new relationships from it, that are going to build for a long term. So, it's a blessing, right? And anybody that could have the opportunity to do this, I mean, should take advantage of it. It will be time well invested in their lives and the others around them.
That's it. That's cool. It's interesting. And I think there is kind of when people are thinking about, kind of like what you went through, right? Well, it's, maybe I'll go, I've never been in a mastermind. I'm going to participate in the mastermind. If you have any thoughts or recommendations for people that are thinking kind of where you were when they're, kind of, what would you tell them if you're thinking about being in a mastermind or joining a mastermind program? What advice would you give them? What would you tell them?
Go into it with an open mind, right? Don't have any expectations, right? Know that you're with a credible person that has been doing this for years, and could really help you. And that's what you want to take out of it. For me, I will continue to use the tools that Blaine has provided for the rest of my life. These are some foundational things that, will help. And that's what we're here for, right? To receive this information and to give it away and to pass it on to other people. So yeah, I'm just, I sit here thinking about, I'm going to shoot into Manhattan in a little while. In the past, I may have said, you know what, I'm not going to do this interview, right? Because it's time crunch, this and that. But I've taken away those worries through some of the things I've learned through Blaine, right? And other people in the group too, right? Because you do associate with people on an ongoing basis, right? So when that happens, you develop relationships with people, and there's something to be said about people coming together to help each other, and in an effort for everybody, right? And that's for me, that's what the mastermind means. And it's opened up me now to being able to think about, there are other things I will do in masterminds. In the past I haven't, but now going forward I'm excited to.
That's very cool. That's very cool. I love the conversation because I think that the idea around co-creating, and then it's not just what you get out of the mastermind, it's what you give back into it, and then what you take to give away again and again and again. And it's an interesting thing. So anyway, so I don't want to keep you too long, because I know you're going to catch a train, and you are on your way in, as we're all starting to travel again. So I just want, on a personal note, I want to tell you, it's amazing to see you, and thank you for taking time to talk to me. I am grateful for these minutes.